What's up everybody, back with some more PTR raid testing, and today we're taking a look at Mythic Fatescribe Roh-Kalo in the new raid Sanctum of Domination. Keep in mind this is not a guide on how to do the fight, and I will mostly focus on the mythic part of the encounter. What's new on Mythic, how and if it changes the overall approach to the fight, and my thoughts on the overall encounter. Now if you want to see more of Fatescribe's mechanics, you can check out my heroic video of this fight. So what's new on Mythic for the #1 Pug Killer Fatescribe? Well, a lot actually. Apart from the standard numerical upswing, you now have to deal with Grim Portent in Phase 1 and Runic Affinity and Exposed Threads of Fate in Phase 2, as well as more Call of Eternity bombs and Fate Fragments in Phase 1. But let's start off with the Grim Portent because it's important? So Fatescribe binds up to 10 players to runes on the Loom of Fates. After 12 seconds, if a bound player is within the rune, they take around 14k damage. On the flip side, if a rune expires without its bound player inside, everyone in the raid dies, or take around 75k damage. So yeah, pretty much die. So if you've seen this fight on Heroic, you'll know there are multiple rings in the middle of the encounter space, each with a bunch of runes in them. And it's these runes that will bind players to them. So when the boss casts this, 10 runes will get a circle around them, and 10 players will be bound to these. One player, one rune, and for the targeted players, these runes will have a large swirly orb above them. Now, keep in mind that the encounter space is pretty big, and you can be bound to any of the runes around the room. So if you're on the opposite side of the rune you get bound to, you best be running fast. Overall, it's not a super complicated mechanic, just extremely punishing. If one person is too slow or moves out a fraction of a second too soon, everyone dies. But it does add a lot to Phase 1, makes it a bit more interesting, prolongs the phase a bit as 10 people will be out jogging. Rip melee. Then we move on to the Phase 2 mechanic, which is the Runic Affinity and Exposed Threads of Fate. Sadly, didn't personally get to try this out that much, but I'll go over what I've learned from talking to other players and watching other guilds testing. So in Phase 2, you have the lovely mechanic where you have to realign the circles and runes in the room, and to make this mechanic less complicated, it's now RNG. And that's where the Runic Affinity comes into play. Fatescribe's machinations reveal several players as having affinity for the Loom of Fates, and these players are capable of manipulating the rings. Meaning, at the start of Phase 2 or intermission, whatever you want to call it, several players will win the lottery and be able to spin the wheel. So you'll no longer be able to pre-assign this, you'll no longer be able to depend on those slightly mechanically better players in your raid for this part. Anything goes. Enjoy. Now, if that wasn't fun enough, there are now beams as well, the Exposed Threads of Fate. When a player or players are within a rune and it starts to spin, a beam will form going from the boss to the rune. Touch the beam and you take around 40k damage every 3 seconds. And this beam will of course follow the rune as it spins. Now, if all runes move in the same direction, that won't be an issue. And when you step out of the rune or the rune gets aligned properly, the beam disappears. However, sometimes going clockwise is the shortest route, sometimes counterclockwise is. So odds are you'll run into a beam sooner or later, meaning you're going to need to offset the beams a bit, so that looks like it'll be fun. Sadly though, methinks this will be one of those carried by weak aura or boss mod fights. On the top of my head, having a weak aura or DBM bigwigs assign a player to each rune that has the Runic Affinity, and the players that are left over will be backups for it when you need 2 players in a rune to make it go counterclockwise. From what I could see from other players raid testing, it looked like 8 players got the Runic Affinity, and there's 6 circles that you need to spin. So the only issue with this theory is if you need to spin more than 2 circles counterclockwise, because like I said, sometimes going that way will be a lot faster than clockwise. However, as long as you make it in time before the realigned fate is done, it doesn't matter that much if you do it super fast. So for some circles it will be fine taking the longer route as long as you get it done in time. Meaning it may very well be enough with just having 2 backups for this phase and the other 6 each deals with a ring. Now that's my take on it. I kinda hope this is not the case though, cause it'll be both fun and frustrating as hell coordinating this on the fly. I'll take the big ring, I'll take the second middle, then I'll take middle, but I'm taking that one. No, you're in the centering. Now, on top of these mechanics, there's some changes / additions to existing mechanics in Phase 1 and 2 as well. Like I mentioned, there are more Call of Eternity bombs now, 5 in total, and when you drop them, they will spawn fated fragments. These orbs used to stun you if you got hit, but has been changed to instead decrease your movement speed by 33% for 7 seconds, which obviously if hit will make it harder dodging fated conjunction and getting to your runes fast enough during Grimportent. And when you kill the Burden of Destiny add from the tank mechanic, a bunch of small fate spawn anomaly will spawn that you need to tank and nuke down. And on that topic, in Phase 2 there will no longer be swarms of fate spawn anomaly spawning, and you instead get 2 fate spawn monstrosities. Unsure if this is a mythic only mechanic or if it's just been changed across the board for all difficulties, as the journal has it listed now for all difficulties, but we did not see this on heroic testing. This ad seems to pulsate despair around them every now and then, which is a large amount of shadow damage, and it slows movement speed. And they also increase their physical damage dealt by 10% every 8 seconds. And yeah, that's pretty much it. I am liking the new mechanics on Mythic, even though the Phase 2 one could be a living nightmare to deal with, unless carried by Weakworm. They've also added one more pattern to the Fated Conjunction beam, but it's still just be near a beam and you'll be safe, so it doesn't change stuff all that much. Now, the addition of more bombs in Phase 1 also means you have to pay more attention to where you're dropping them, so you don't run out of space or use up too much, as they'll detonate when the next set of bomb drops. And both the bombs and tank mechanics can overlap with the Fated Conjunction beams, which means you'll have to do some quick thinking and repositioning so you don't blow up the raid with either of the mechanics. So yeah, I am very excited to progress this fight on Mythic. Looks like it could be one very tough cookie to crack, or one that makes your raid go ballistic on each other and your guild disbands. But yeah, that's pretty much it for this first look. We'll cover all bosses on PTR, and proper guides will be out once the raid is released. And on top of this, I'm streaming all of the raid testing on PTR, so don't forget to check that out whenever there's raid testing announced. Otherwise, I'm streaming all of our main progression once it's live on Mondays and Tuesdays. Now, if you have any questions at all about this encounter, hit me up in the comments or become a patron and get access to the Stankie Discord, where you can get help with anything raiding related. Now, don't forget the usual stuff. It's kinda grimportant. Like, comment, subscribe, and ring that notification bell. Thanks for watching, and I will see you next time.